Today I am going to be sharing with you guys this recipe for a delicious sancocho. This is a super hearty meat and tropical root vegetable soup that is delicious and definitely one that you want to give a try. So make sure to stick around and watch. I am going to be using beef for my sancocho today. I had bought a bulk roast a while back and I had this frozen, so I decided this is what I was going to use. I have about 2 pounds here since I'm making a pretty big amount today. But when it comes to sancocho, you can use whatever meat you want. You can use some pork or you can use chicken. Or you can combine all three, beef, pork, and chicken, and make a sancocho of all three meats. And to that, I am going to be adding some sofrito. I'm going to marinate it a little bit, okay? So I'm gonna be adding the leftover sofrito I have. So I'm gonna be adding about 2 tablespoons of sofrito into my meat. And to that, I'm going to be adding 1 tablespoon of adobo, 1 teaspoon of oregano, and 2 teaspoons of minced garlic because I absolutely love this stuff. If you don't want to use garlic, you don't have to. You can omit that out. And then we're going to mix our meat. You can choose to mix it with a spatula, with your hand. I'm using a glove here to just incorporate all those flavors throughout my meat. Now that we're done mixing our meat, it's time to go ahead and get started in our sancocho. Now I am going to be using my large Dutch oven to make this sancocho. Anytime I'm making a big roast or a big stew that is to feed the multitudes, I use this big bad boy. Now in here, I'm covering the bottom of the pot using some olive oil, and I'm just simply going to be browning the meat first. Now I'm just going to let the pot heat up a little bit. It's at a medium. Now I'm going to go ahead and add my meat into my pot. And I'm just going to let it brown a little bit. Now I'm simply just gonna move my meat around, try to brown the other side. Now that my meat is all browned, I'm going to go ahead and make my broth, my stock. And for this, I'm going to be using 16 cups of water. To my 16 cups of water, I'm going to add 2 bay leaves, a packet of sazon, and 1 tablespoon of a beef bouillon. Now, if you're making less, you can definitely use a whole lot less. I have another video showing you guys how to make this sancocho in the Instant Pot and how to also make it for less quantity using pork instead. I'm going to go ahead and mix everything up. I'm going to turn my heat up to a high, and I'm going to let this broth come to a boil. Now that our broth has come to a complete boil, I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on this, and I'm going to turn the heat down all the way to low, and I'm going to let this cook for about 45 minutes so that meat gets really soft and tender. Now for the bulk of our sancocho, we are going to be using some recao. This is coriander. If you don't have access to this, it's okay. You can just use a little bunch, maybe like a 1/4 cup of cilantro. I have a couple of green bananas here. I had placed these in the refrigerator to keep them from going right. I got 2 plantains as well, and I did the same thing, placed them in the fridge to prevent them from going right. I have some ñame that I have cut up into little squares. These were frozen as well. I'm going to be taking some yuca or cassava root, and I'm going to be cutting this as well like my ñame. So I'm not going to be using the whole 5-pound bag. I'm pretty much just going to use the equivalent of a 2-pound bag, so half of this. And I'm also going to be adding some corn on the cob, and these I'm going to be slicing them into rounds because it just absorbs all the flavor. It's really good. I'll be adding some adobo to it as well and some salt to taste. I'm gonna cut them into little slices like this. And I'm going to be placing them in a bowl of water so that they do not get black. And I'll be doing the same thing with the bananas. All right, my friends, so our meat has officially been cooking there for about 45 minutes. So now we are going to complete the rest of our sancocho. First, I'm going to go ahead and taste my broth and see how is it that is coming out. When I do this, you can use your palm and just taste it on there. Really good flavor in that broth. I am going to go ahead and add a little bit of saltiness to this broth. I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of salt to it and see how that does. And at this point, when you do it, you're going to salt this to taste. All right, so I start with a teaspoon of salt, and then I'm gonna go into my adobo and add in as much as I like the broth to have that saltiness. I'm gonna go ahead and add about 1 tablespoon of adobo to this broth. That's gonna be plenty for me. Mix it in. The good thing is that later on, after it's done, if you want to go ahead and salt it some more, you can do that too. If you're making a smaller portion, you're going to use less. So now that my broth is ready, I'm going to go ahead and add in my roots. I'm gonna add my yuca first. Now, I think I might have to remove a little bit of the broth if it gets too full, we'll see. Then I'm going to go ahead and go in and add my ñame. Now I'm gonna go in with my bananas and my plantains. Ooh, look at this. So beautiful. And then the meat is there simmering with it too. Yum. You know what? I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna remove some of this water and save it for later. I washed a container that my bananas were in. I'm gonna remove some of the water just to give it some space for it to boil. Just like that. And then when it kind of cooks down a little bit, I'll go ahead and add the broth back in. Now I'm gonna add my recao. Carrot, I'm gonna go ahead and add that in as well. Give it a little bit of color. And then I'm also going to add the corn. And I'm going to bring my heat up to about a medium so I can bring this back to a simmer again. Now, as this is simmering, the broth is going to thicken and it's going to reduce a little bit. Once that point comes, I'm going to go ahead and add in the excess of the liquid that I removed, because as it thickens and it reduces, it'll make more room for that liquid that I initially removed. So the sancocho has been sitting here on a medium-high heat for about 30 minutes, and as you can see, the water level has gone down a little bit, but I want you guys to see how nice and thick the broth actually is. Look at that. See that? So good. At this point, you can check to see how soft your yuca is, okay? And if it is as tender as you'd like it to be, like this is really nice and tender, that means your sancocho is pretty much done. However, you can let the sancocho sit there, cover it, put it on low, and let it simmer until the broth gets even thicker. Some people like to take some of the roots and mash them and toss them back in just to make the broth super mega thick. You can choose to do whatever your liking is on this. I'm personally going to be taking this over to my mom's for a nice dinner with the family. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off and then put the lid on it and just let it sit there for a while until I'm ready to head on over. Since this is a Dutch oven, it does hold in a lot of heat. And so even though it's just gonna be sitting there, it's gonna continue actually cooking. Now is your turn to give this amazing sancocho a try. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.